Hey everyone, this is the Eric and Everything Show, the show where we talk about ideas, how they affect our lives, and how changing our ideas for the better changes us for the better. This channel basically has a 3-point mission that better ideas equals better lives. Better lives means transforming bad ideas into good ideas, and that the first step in transformation is information, because you can't be improved by what you don't know. Right now, it seems like the big thing that's in our lives, at least this week, is rioting. I don't know about you. Rioting triggered by the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis by a police officer, or actually the murder of George Floyd. We can now say Derek Chauvin was charged with murder on Friday, third-degree murder, manslaughter. And a lot of people would reasonably say that it was always murder, we just didn't call it that. And that charge has come through now, but it wasn't made until riots had started in Minneapolis and eventually elsewhere, including here in Michigan, where I am. There was a riot in Lansing last night. 2 nights ago, we had a riot here in Grand Rapids. I was downtown yesterday morning helping clean it up. And at least with those two, the Lansing riot and the Grand Rapids riot, it wasn't supposed to be a riot. It was supposed to be a silent protest, or at least a peaceful one. A lot has been said in defense of the peaceful protesters. I don't really feel like there's been much of an attempt to understand the riot. I know people who were there for the peaceful part, who did their thing and went home and came back in the morning to help clean up when they heard what had happened. But here's the thing about this stuff. It's a mixed bag of people. People don't all come with the same motivation, or even at the same time, for that matter. That's been a big part of the narrative, that all the peaceful folk went home and all the crazies came out. People who came to break windows. And the organizers went to such great lengths to impress the need for this to be a peaceful protest. And they can't help the fact that some people are coming with spray paint and firecrackers and hammers. They brought them. They weren't like making it up as they went. They knew they wanted to set cars on fire. Some of those people were there from the get-go. One of the first articles I saw about the protest before there was anything bad going on was that people would throw bottles at the cops and the rest of the crowd would tell them to stop. It was really interesting to watch the live coverage that night because they had Robert Womack, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, on the phone. He was downtown. He works for the county commissioner's office. He is an activist. And he had some constructive feedback about the organization of the march. Not the cause, but some of the methods. Because one of the issues is that there were scheduled speakers at Rosa Parks Circle. But then other people were allowed to jump on the microphone, either because that was intentionally being allowed, or maybe it just wasn't intentionally being prevented. He didn't say, but at one point somebody got up and started saying that they should kill the cops. And not only kill the cops, but kill their families. I'm not saying that. I don't know. The commissioner is saying that. His assessment was that the older people didn't really react to that when they heard it, but some of the younger generation in the crowd kind of wanted to get behind that. And then he said that when he heard the march was supposed to end at the downtown police station, which I don't know if that's true or not, or it was supposed to keep going a little bit, but that was near the end. When he heard that it was supposed to end up at the downtown police station, this is what he said. He said, "That's when I lost all hope that this was going to be a peaceful protest." I thought that was really revealing. He's not saying that the cause was wrong, or that people shouldn't have been there, or that people had bad motives. He's just offering constructive criticism as an activist who's seen this in other cities, on behalf of others, because it's a mixed bag. And then it did start to get dark, and then it was like a switch flipped. Different people showed up. Others tried to stop what ended up happening. Those people ended up getting attacked. Thankfully, nobody was injured. And the cops are using tear gas to try and disperse people until 3 a.m. And I was down there 5 hours later with my work gloves and my Minions mask, because I'm not going down there to get sick. And I got to tell you, I felt like there wasn't a single window on Division Avenue that didn't get smashed. And they're smashing up stuff that invests in the community. They smashed up the public library. They hit the Kendall College for Art and Design. They smashed a window at Civic Theater. And they're spray painting all kinds of stuff. One person writes, "We the people, not we the police." But then like the person next to them will come by later and write, "Save a life, kill a cop." There's just this mixed bag that some people have a well-developed reality that they're trying to express and other people don't. But I got to say this, that for all those smashed windows, I didn't see any looting. Myself, with my own eyes, I didn't see any evidence of that. I'm not speaking for what other people saw or experienced. I did read that Kilwins got robbed. What I saw myself was the opposite. I saw smashed windows in office buildings, some kind of explosive, something that was burning because the sprinklers are going off, still squirting out into the street. There's a really bad smell. But the computers on the desks are still there. Saw that several times. Saw a super nice home furnishing store that got smashed up. Didn't look like a single thing was taken. There was a big traffic cone that had gotten thrown through the window into the showroom, but nothing was stolen. It wasn't a bunch of people going around looting stuff. It wasn't a free-for-all of people just taking things. The soup kitchens weren't smashed up. I didn't see any churches smashed up. I think there was a broken window around the corner from Dégagé. I'm saying this because I don't know what hindsight is going to be, because I'm really concerned that a mythology develops. Hindsight is not 2020. You get a crystallized idea of what happened, and there's going to be headlines that say, 1 year ago today, mass hysteria in Grand Rapids, looting and property destruction. And I don't feel like that's what happened. Now, anything related to the authorities got real messed up. The police department was a mess. The prosecutor's office was a mess. I think the Social Security building was a mess. There was a corner office in one of those places. I didn't even know what it was, but they didn't just break the windows. They ran inside and they threw the desk over and they threw a copy machine someplace. Like they trashed somebody's office. And I felt like that kind of thing was focused on specific targets. It wasn't random cars getting set on fire. It was police cruisers with nobody in them, by the way. Nobody was injured. No reported injuries in the city of Grand Rapids Saturday night. It's not like Minneapolis where some guy got killed during looting, or somebody got killed in Detroit too because somebody drove by the crowd and just fired into the crowd. I mean, it's a mess. It's scary. And they tried to hurt people a couple of times. I know of at least 2 people who were attacked. One was a protester, one of the peaceful protesters, who was trying to stop some guys from smashing windows. So what do? They jump on the protester. But the protester's got a gun, and he manages to get it out, and he fires it up into the air, and everybody goes running. And the next thing you know, the cops are throwing canisters of tear gas, and there's riot gear, and the whole 9 yards. I'm taking the time to describe this because I want to look at the other side too, and I don't want you to think I'm not taking it seriously. I know how serious it is. I've got the glass in my shoes, okay? But this kind of stuff doesn't just happen. Everyone wants to understand the movement. Nobody wants to understand the riot. You can't look at a riot in a vacuum and say, see, this is senseless violence. It wasn't. It was targeted. It was concentrated imperfectly, for sure, but concentrated on specific issues and authority figures. Not perfectly, but that is not an excuse. It's just a fact. To me, it's like a high fever. Like you wouldn't try to justify a high fever, but you would try to understand it. Why is this person sick? What's been dumped into the situation that this is what's coming out? Because there have been lots of marches in Grand Rapids that didn't become riots. You can't justify a riot, but you can understand it if you want to. No, a riot is not a peaceful protest. No, it is not protected under any law or constitution. Yes, the police were right to call it an unlawful gathering. When I see a picture from Minneapolis with people posing epically in front of a burning Steak and Shake, that makes my stomach churn. It can't be justified or excused, but I think it's a symptom. It's not an isolated issue. It's an exhalation. People have been breathing something in for years and years and years that's making them sicker and sicker and sicker, and they breathe it out, and this is what it is. I'm not trying to excuse anything. I'm not trying to defend anything. I'm trying to understand it, because better ideas equal better lives. Now, the big quote by Martin Luther Jr. that's going around on Facebook is that riots are the voice of the unheard. Now, Martin Luther King was not pro-riot, but he understood them. And one of the things that we definitely have to come to terms with is that there are people who are heard and protected and people who are unheard and targeted. And we got to stop denying that. There are people who are heard and protected and people who are unheard and targeted. I'm not making this up. The research is in. It's not propaganda. It's going on. Look up a crazy study I just read, the MSU School of Law, called Exonerations in 2016. They went back to 1989, which is the year I was born. So this is my entire lifetime we're talking about. They started in 1989, and they looked up every single person convicted of a violent crime who had been proven innocent later and released. It's called Exonerations in 2016. Look it up. This is what they found. That black men convicted of murder, not accused, convicted and sent to prison. Black men convicted of murder are, present tense, 50% more likely to be proven innocent at a later date than white men. In other words, they were innocent and falsely convicted of murder and sent to prison, 50% more likely than white men. It's not equal imperfection in the system where it sometimes comes out wrong. It is disproportionately biased against black men. I'm not saying intentionally. Give me a chance to kind of work through this idea, and we'll talk about that. But black men convicted of sexual assault, that was another one. 3.5 times more likely, not 50%, 350% of black men convicted of sexual assault, more likely to be proven innocent later than white men. And if they are proven innocent, it takes an average of 3 years longer for a black inmate to be released than a white inmate who's proven innocent. In other words, it takes longer for people to figure it out because no one is bothering to look it up. Or the appeal process, the paperwork itself takes longer because nobody can be bothered to follow up on it. There's a 3-year dragging of the feet involved in making sure black men are getting justice compared to white men in the same situation. I'm not making this up. It is currently the case. This is as of 2016. As a matter of fact, a professor at U of M, not MSU, who did the study, described it this way, that it's and this is a strong statement. This is a strong statement, okay? I don't know, but this is what he said. He described it as the systematic fabrication of crimes by the police against the black community. Now, that's in reference to something else. That's in reference to 15 major police scandals that have come about since, again, 1989. And in those 15 major police scandals, what was found was that the police had systematically entrapped up to 2,000 people during that time with fabricated drug offenses that had never occurred, and that the overwhelming majority of those people were black. It was not equal disbursement, and I understand what that situation is, that you're sure that somebody is guilty of something, but you can't get them on it. They took a plea deal of some kind, they ratted somebody out, or there's just no evidence, but you've got a gut feeling that it's them, and then you come up with a way to get them behind bars. 15 major police scandals have gone that way. The overwhelming majority of those people who were entrapped were black. What did I see? And those were drug-related offenses. What did I see spray painted all over the walls of pretty much every building downtown the other morning? F12. Over and over and over again. F word 12, F word 12, F word 12. And I didn't know what that meant. I had to look it up. 12 is urban slang for the drug unit. It's narcotics police. That's what 12 is. The protests are incorporating this idea of disproportionate, unjust accusations and convictions of black men by the police, by the system for drug-related offenses. This stuff isn't coming from nowhere. And it's not just that the black community is unheard, it's that it is unfairly targeted. And people who are not being targeted don't see it. They don't have a reason to see it because they're not the ones being affected until there's a riot. And even then, there's a 50-50 chance. Will they see the root cause or not? It's a general culture of complacently passing over the situation without a lot of attention. This is what I am learning. So you end up with millions of individuals who are being pitied at best, overlooked most often, singled out at worst, rarely empathized with or understood outside of their own community, treated as a project to be fixed up or a squeaky wheel to be placated, people to be put up with, basically, people to be put up with, so that there's rarely a moment of true human connection between somebody from the inner city and somebody from the suburbs. And then you get the data out of MSU law that black convictions have a higher rate of official misconduct by police. That's another thing than white people. The police are not applying the same level of force equally. And then force that's being applied is more likely to be found inappropriate, misconduct, which is what these riots have been about. It's crazy. It's true. It's crazy and it's true. It's crazy and it's true. And you can begin to understand. I do. I hate it. I hate the riots, but I get it. Is it a necessary evil? No, of course it's not. It is an evil that we are living with because of our failure to address other issues. That prejudice is not a problem we fixed in the 60s, that racism destroys people's lives today. And the people who haven't been affected have gotten comfortable with it. I've gotten comfortable with it. And I know this is a really complicated issue, and I want to be as objective as I can. The police see the worst in human nature all the time. They see how that nature has even developed differently in different communities. I get it. The system that they represent, because of the badge they wear, is distrusted, it's hated, and it's not hated equally. The danger that they find themselves in falls along racial lines. And they have this gut experience that tells them, and I'm not saying it's right, I don't know, I want to think it's wrong, but I don't know. But a cop doing this every day ends up with this worldview where when they pull a black guy over, their gut tells them that this person is more likely to be armed, more likely to have a prior, more likely to resist, more likely to run. And then they, as an officer, have to go chasing after them through the hood, which puts them in even more danger. And they end up in this mode. I don't think I'm speculating. I think this is what the data says, that our police are ending up in this mode where they apply force differently based on race. That's what the data shows. It's a higher occurrence of misconduct by police. Their perception of what's going on in this moment is being affected by a racial profile that maybe they are not even deliberately doing. I'm not saying it's on purpose. I know of one case in the Detroit area because somebody I knew was involved. He called the cops on a black guy who was scoping out people's cars and trying all the doors, and he was getting into cars that weren't locked. And a cop comes by, and this guy is pretending to be asleep. Not my friend, the guy who was getting into the cars. He's pretending to be asleep in one of the cars that he's climbed into. And so the cop knocks on the window with his flashlight, and the guy doesn't react. He's playing possum. I don't know what he's thinking. Maybe he's hoping the cop will think something's wrong with him. I don't know. I don't think he had a plan. But the cop opens the door, and this guy snaps up and tries to take off like a shot. And the cop must have known that he was going to do that because he had hooked him by the collar before he had even moved. And so this guy basically clotheslines himself and goes back on the pavement. And the cop just starts laying into him right there in front of my friend, hitting his face over and over and over again. Basically, he's incapacitating the guy so he doesn't try to run again. And he hits him so hard that he actually breaks his own fist. I'm not saying this happens every time. I'm just speaking from my own extended experience because my friend was standing right there. Now, there's a hearing to look into it. And it ultimately pans out that this cop had supposedly done the right thing based on whatever he had put in his report, whatever the evidence was. And the guy that I knew who had been there went to the hearing. He had to give testimony. And the cop, I think, got 6 months paid leave because his fist was broken. And he had a big smile on his face, and he thanks my friend because that phone call basically just got him a 6-month paid vacation. Now, I don't know what happened to the guy on the ground who got hit, but I know in other situations, the only way the system knows how to address the fact that a police officer was injured is to add an additional charge of assaulting a police officer. If you resist and it results in the injury of a police officer, that's the charge. Doesn't matter if you were meaning to hurt the cop or not. Cop was injured, assaulting a police officer. I know people this has happened to. But the thing I'm getting at with this whole scenario, this story, is that it didn't make sense. Why was that level of force used? Now, I've been reading up on this, and there's something that I think is actually pretty cool in police training, and it's called the triangle of force. It is regulated how much force you use under different circumstances. And in theory, it's a brilliant model. The triangle of force automatically authorizes an officer to use the next level of force above what's being used against them. If somebody is not cooperating, you can restrain them. If somebody fights you, you can incapacitate them. If somebody tries to incapacitate you, you can kill them. You are automatically authorized to use deadly force to prevent someone from incapacitating you as a police officer. That's the triangle of force. The issue is, how do you assess the amount of force being used against you? And is that assessment being affected by a racial profile? Unconscious racial profiling. Someone's race impacts our assessment of the situation. That's what the data is showing. That police perception of how much force is being used against them changes disproportionately in the cases of black men. And that triangle of force training kicks in. And next thing you know, you're escalating a situation based on a misdiagnosis of how much you are being resisted. Now, that sounds like I'm being really critical. I'm not. I'm trying to be objective. I know that you're not incompetent. I'm not saying you're a maniac. I'm not saying the cop's a bad person. I actually think that thinking is part of the problem. You can't take it for granted that those are just bad guys. I don't think it's that simple. I think that a lot of times it's a good guy who's just trying to do his job, who doesn't know that there is a latent, unconscious pressure to interpret a black man's behavior a certain way. What did the police say in Minneapolis about George Floyd? Why did they say that they were pinning him down on the ground like that? Because they couldn't get the cuffs on him. That was the story. That he was it was incoherent, uncooperative, possibly very drunk, and they couldn't handcuff him. So they restrained him. That's the triangle of force. They restrained him, but they did it by pinning him down on the ground, which is much closer to that incapacitating maneuver. By the neck, that is. Pinning him down on the ground is one thing. Pinning him down by the neck is more of an incapacitating maneuver, I think. Call me out on it if I'm wrong. I'm willing to be wrong. But they pinned him down by the neck, and that assumed a greater level of resistance than what they were saying he was putting up. Because they don't claim the resistance was malicious or intended to cause any harm to the officers. They just couldn't get the cuffs on him. But to pin him down by the neck like that, and then to assume that he's lying when he says he can't breathe, which is essentially what they told the bystanders, right? You saw the video. He's talking just fine. And it shows how completely out of touch with the situation you can become. Pounding a guy's face in because he tried to run away. Asphyxiating someone on the ground because you can't get the cuffs on. Now, I'm not saying the cops are bad. I don't even think the cops are a special case. I think that nobody in any field is being trained carefully and intentionally on how a person's race impacts your assessment of them. Let's get off the cops and look for a different example. Banking, right? Mortgage discrimination. We've all heard the studies like this, but Marquette University is one. Economics department did a study, I think also in 2016. They sent thousands of identical email queries to lenders all over the country. It included credit information, but they would change the names in the form so that it was either a white-sounding name like Spencer or Maxwell in that particular study, or it was a black-sounding name like Jamal or Daquan, and this is in 2016, they found that Daquan may have the same credit score as Spencer, but on average, he's less likely to get a response to his original email. And if he does get one, he's less likely to get a follow-up reply with additional information. And the study checked it against how the lenders responded to different credit scores. And basically, it worked out that if you're black and applying for a loan, you might as well have a credit score that's 71 points lower, because that's how lenders respond to you. And it's really hard because we also know that loan delinquency is hugely disproportionate by race. And you've got to try and be objective and figure out what's going on. The PEW Center did a study about this, and it showed really challenging results that the percentage of loans being defaulted on in America today are hugely more likely to be Black and Hispanic borrowers compared to loan delinquency among white and Asian borrowers. But even there, this is where I find myself asking, because of all this other stuff we're learning about from MSU, what's the prejudice in that reporting? Is it easier for a clerk to log a loan as being delinquent when it's a black guy compared to a white guy? I'm speculating now, and I apologize for that. I don't know how helpful this is, but this is what I'm thinking through. We're working through ideas. Because I've been in situations where I wasn't paying on a loan, and some super nice and helpful person explained to me how to put it in deferment so that it wouldn't affect me as much. Do they do that for everybody with that same enthusiasm? Or is this just another black guy who's not paying his bill? And what kind of loan was he allowed to take out in the first place? That's a big one. Lenders, in my experience, can be pretty good. In my experience. Lenders, in my experience, can be good about trying to talk you out of loans that are not a good fit for you, credit-wise. Now, is that always the case? Or do they not want to argue with a black person who wants to take out a high-cost subprime loan? And a subprime loan is basically a loan. It's basically a loan designed for someone that you don't think is going to pay you back. If you don't have good credit, it's a loan designed for that. It has a really high interest rate, and it has extra fees. It's something that you get because you don't qualify for a conventional loan. Now, paradoxically, it makes it more likely that you're going to run into trouble with your payments because you owe more to start with, and then you're paying fees that other people are not paying. It's kind of like insufficient fund charges, where the bank charges you money for not having any money. But we know in the 1930s, lenders would give black borrowers subprime loans with high interest rates and high fees, no matter what they qualified for. And they weren't even disclosing this because this was before the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act in 1975, I think, where banks have to actually list all of the possible loans and explain what people do and don't qualify for. So the minorities were getting screwed on loans and not even having any idea that there was any such thing as a better loan. They were just kept in total ignorance about the financial wisdom of borrowing money. And this was commonplace. Congress had to pass laws to make it stop. It wasn't until, when was the Equal Credit Opportunity Act? Early 90s, 1990, 91, 92, something like that. It was passed, an act that basically banned the practice of discriminating against applicants based on their race. Think about that. Up until the 1990s, banks could legally deny you a loan for no reason other than you were black. Now, hear me. That doesn't mean they're doing it on purpose. It doesn't. I think that people don't know they're doing it. They don't get up in the morning and set out to discriminate against people. Cops don't wake up and say, I'm going to beat up a black guy today. I don't think that happens. But unconscious racial profiling affects your assessment of the situations that come your way, whether you are a juror or a clerk or a superintendent in a public system that doesn't teach financial wellness to inner city schools, but does teach it at suburban schools. I was with a friend of mine once who referred back to that famous bit by Chris Rock. There's a civil war in the black community, right? 1997, I think, the HBO special. We're standing in a church parking lot. It's not a church that I'm currently connected with, so don't go looking it up. And he goes right in for the Chris Rock bit. He says, I love black people, but I hate N-word. And that's exactly the reason that Chris Rock stopped doing that bit, because he felt like he had given white people permission to use racial slurs. And I was really pretty taken aback by that at that moment, because the truth is later, that bit was really helpful for me. This is confession time, okay? I'm going to be transparent with you. I want you to see how easy this is. I moved in to the city to work with an inner city church plant. I had no experience whatsoever with the inner city. I did not have an urban bone in my body. I grew up in the country. This is what Christians call a spirit-led moment. That's why I got that job. And I start seeing things that I've never seen before. It's late at night. I'm driving down Leonard Street in Grand Rapids. All of a sudden, in the middle of the road, there's a black guy in a black hoodie walking down the center of the lane. I have no way of knowing he's there until I see him in my headlights like 10 feet in front of me, and I'm going like 45 miles an hour, probably too fast. And I thought, what in the world is the matter with this guy? I mean, does he not realize there's some evolutionary nighttime camouflage going on here? Cars cannot see him. But then in the middle of the day, same thing. I would see black guys walking in the middle of the street, blocking traffic. I didn't see any white people doing that. And I'm seeing people scream at each other. And it's not always friendly. It turns out that mother is sometimes only half a word. And I feel like that I had never had any kind of stereotypes about black people. But then I moved into the city and they started to develop all by themselves. And I really did start to get kind of ugly in my own head. This is the truth. I'm just being honest with you. I'm driving down Wealthy Street, and I'd see a black guy in a car stopping traffic so that he can wait for someone else to pull out of a parallel parking space. I want you to know how easily this happens. I sat there, and I thought to myself, what is this guy doing? A white guy wouldn't do that. That's what I was thinking. And then I saw a white guy do it. And do you know what I would do in my head? I'd think he must have a good reason. There must be some kind of emergency, and he really needs that space. So I'd criticize a black man for doing something, but then excuse a white guy for doing the same exact thing. That's when I knew I had a problem, and that it was a problem that people who aren't bad people can have. And it sounds weird to say this, but that Chris Rock bit about the Civil War in the black community, that really diffused that for me. Because he illustrated that not all black people are the same. There are differences, even within an inner city black community. You can't look at somebody on the basis of anything other than their own behavior and assume that you know what's coming next. You can't. You can't make those assumptions because you have no way of knowing what kind of person that person really is. You have to let people speak for themselves and be themselves. And that really disrupted the kind of racial prejudice that I was feeling. And that application was not at all in that bit, but that's what I got out of it. But it somehow had the opposite effect on this friend of mine from years before, where it actually gave him permission to lean into the stuff that he hated. And it gave him permission to use a stereotype and a slur. And maybe people do need a safe space to talk about things that make them uncomfortable. I don't know. I might be violating that safe space by telling this story, and I'm sorry if I am. I'm not trying to attack anybody. I'm trying to illustrate how easy it is for people to slip into a mode of racial profiling. It doesn't even necessarily get better when it becomes conscious. Because people start to defend their own racial profiling. They argue in favor of the stereotype they believe in. And sometimes I've heard it because of stories, right? My parents got beat up by black guys who broke into the house. Or I got mugged. Black guy pointed a gun at me. Didn't know if I was going to die or not. And for the rest of their lives, they walk around assuming that the black people around them are dangerous, unless proven otherwise. Guilty until proven innocent, right? The definition of prejudice. And does it sound familiar? Because that's exactly what the people are writing about right now. Guilty until proven innocent because I had a traumatic experience with a cop that killed so-and-so. The cop is guilty until proven innocent. And even then, we might riot anyway if they are proven innocent. And I'm sorry if that's your story. It's a horrible experience, and I'm not judging you for it. I'm trying to be objective. I can't moralize on the fact that you've responded that way. I'm just trying to describe that this is a fact about our lives. We do this. It's real. We look at people based on the color of their skin, and we make snap judgments about them. And I just feel like education has got to be the first step here. I don't mean the education system. I mean, if someone had prepared you for the fact that you might respond to a traumatic event by walking around with a prejudice about race, if you've been prepared for that, would you have walked away from that experience with the same level of prejudice? Or could you have been better prepared so that your scars didn't become projectiles? Redemption means turning bad things into good things. And the first step is to assume that prejudice is affecting your choices in ways you are not aware of. Not the choices of other people. Your choices. Because everybody is doing this. Red and yellow, black and white. You are walking around profiling the people you run into, and you've got to stop. It's up to you to examine yourself and change for the better. You have to want to be the reason there's not a riot in your city. Assume that prejudice is affecting your choices. Ask why, how, when, and stop. I had to do it. And if I can do it, you can do it. I did not make excuses for myself. You can stop making excuses for yourself. All right, I'm all fired up, but I don't have anything else to say about this. So if this was in any way, shape, or form worth listening to, hit the like and subscribe button, hit the bell icon, check in with me in about a week. I'm going to try and line up some interviews so that it's not always just me ranting about stuff that I think. So for now, stay safe, stay informed, stay healthy, go turn bad things into good things. Catch you later.